This lesson is going to be about how to draw hands. So we're going to be learning how to do the front of hands, the back of hands, also about fingers and nails. So the very first thing I want us to do is open our sheet of paper. I'll be working on Procreate, but you are going to be working on a large sheet of paper. If you don't have access to a large sheet of paper, you're going to end up using about 3 regular sized pieces of paper. One for fingers and nails, one for the front hand, and one for the back hand. You can use regular pencil to do this, so your graphite. If you have access to charcoal, you can practice using that as well. Just be warned that if you use charcoal pencil, it doesn't really erase. So we're going to start out by just labeling really quickly. So at the top, you're going to label the entire assignment hands. And again, if you need to use separate papers, just label all of them. And then your name, date, period at the bottom as usual. Once you have that, we're going to split our large paper into 3 parts. So if you have a very big piece of paper, 18 by 24, you're going to set it up like this. This is going to be roughly the space where the front of your hand is, or the palm side. This is where I want to practice the back. And then at the bottom, we're going to leave room for fingers and nails. Then you should have enough space over here for practice. Again, if you don't have access to this, then that's kind of how you would split this up. So you would do your practice on another sheet of paper. We're going to start with fingers first to help us. Even though we're drawing full hands, if we already know how to draw fingers, that's going to help us more in the long run. And we're also going to be dealing with nails. Again, I would set this up if you had your paper kind of on the larger side, about here and here. So let's start with your fingers, and I'll use different colors to differentiate. Your finger, if you look at it, so observe your hand, has 3 different parts. So you're going to make 3 different lines. They're roughly even, but the tip of your finger is just slightly shorter than the other 2. We're going to do the front and then also the back. And that's why we're learning how to do nails at the same time. Let's start with the front. If you think of your finger just as a cylinder or a set of cylinders on top of each other, that's the best way for you to break this down. The only thing is that at the bottom, if we treat that like the base, that's going to be wider than it is at the top. So we're not going to do perfect straight rectangles like this, but we're going to taper off. So they get smaller and smaller, and at the end we don't want a triangle, but we want to round the tip of our finger. And those 3 different parts create the full length of a finger. A lot of the times I see just these hot dogs that look like this. That's not really natural. Even worse, they get bigger at the tip, which is very strange. So break it down into these 3 parts, connect, not perfectly. We don't want a smooth line, but we want to account for the bumps and natural occurrences between these 3 different parts that bend. So just write down that the base is widest, closer to your palm, and then make sure that the tip of your finger is round. We're going to use those same proportions for the back of our hand, so 3. Get in the base and separate these into cylinders that taper, so get smaller towards the top. So very similar in structure, but now we need to add our nails to this and some other details. So your nail, if you look at it and study, the worst version of a nail is when you give me a hot dog finger and then just cut it off. That looks like the letter A. So this is wrong. A better version of it that's still not great is this like gumdrop. So very cartoony, also not lovely. What you want to do when you have your fingers, again, you want it to kind of taper so it's a little wider. Your nail bed is going to curve slightly, not at the tip of your finger all the way over here. You want to give it room on the sides, kind of go up. And then depending on the length of your fingernail, you'll also see a curve. So depending on how you cut it and how your fingers grow, you might see it very straight. Usually you have to style it like that. Naturally, it grows a little bit upwards. If you grow out your nails, then they'll go past the fingertip, so it really depends on you. I'm going to have these very short clipped nails here. The part that lifts off from your finger is going to separate, and you'll see this kind of division in color where it's like a little bit whiter. And sometimes in the nail bed, you'll see this like little line for the nail growth or cuticle. And there's more details you can add to that. Again, if you have longer fingernails, then they'll just go up and past, and depending on how you want them shaped, they'll look a little bit different. So that's the detail that we're going to add to the back of your hand versus the front or the palm side. So let's add that nail right in here. That's a very easy indication that this is the back of your hand. But we also want to differentiate in the different parts of the digits. So these areas where they fold, you're going to see kind of simpler folds here on the front or the palm side. You'll see these little kind of frowns. You might see a line at the top, but typically you're going to see a line that kind of curves downwards. If you open and close your hand, you can see that. In the lower part, you're going to see a lot more detail, so you'll have more like a leaf shape. In the back of your hand, you're going to see that same thing, just with way more detail, so a lot more lines, because that tends to bend going outwards as opposed to folding inwards. It's going to have to stretch, so you see a lot more of these lines so that they can stretch over your knuckle. The top one, again, is just less detailed, but it still has more lines than in the front. Connect that, leave room for the knuckles, and that is how you do fingers and nails. So in addition to doing the fingers just straight forward and back, I also want to show you one on the side. So we're going to start with just some simple lines wherever you have room for it. If you need to do it at the top, that's fine. But we're going to go up, down, and this is going to end up being the tip of my finger. So if you hold your hand to the side and look, you'll see that the top is very flat. So the top of your hand where your nails are, there's just kind of skin there. So the top of your fingers are going to be flat. I'm going to make my cylinders on the bottom of that. So just turn these into cylinders. As they bend, you'll see these angles instead. The tip of my finger from the side is going to be kind of just round instead. And make sure that the base is the widest part again. So double check that that base is really wide. For the top of your finger, you're going to get your knuckle very loose. We just don't want really pointy, sharp angles. At the bottom, look and see these folds that are occurring where your fingers are bending. You might see some more depending on how much muscle versus like fat or how hydrated your hands are. So you might see some more of those. And round those off. We don't want to go like this and make them like a weird letter M or strange textured like necklaces, but we want just subtle little curves to indicate that there's like meat on our bones, right? And then at the end of my finger, I should see some of my nails. So about like half a nail, a little bit curving, coming out. And depending on how far your nails are, you can either go over the fingertip or stay within it. And that's how you really deal with the side angle of your fingers. Your paper in front of you. What you can do for quick proportions is just measure your hand. So if I put my hand right next to my paper, I can see how tall is my whole hand from the very top of it to the very bottom where my wrist starts. I can also see where my fingers end, at least kind of roughly. But if you don't have access to that, we're going to do just the basics. So no matter how big or how small it is, you have the proportions of your hand. So on the right side of my screen, you'll see in purple, I'm going to be doing the reverse. I am right-handed, so I'll be drawing in red, but I'll be following along and everything will be symmetrical. If you are left-handed and you are drawing your right hand instead, that's what you'll see. So open with your palm facing you. And you want to start with a rectangle. We don't want a perfectly robotic rectangle like this, but we want something that's just a little bit longer than it is wide. If you think of a square, just make it a little bit taller. And you want to curve these lines. So curve the top going down, curve the bottom going up, and curve the sides a little bit as well. That's going to be more natural. You don't have any really harsh right angles or sharp angles on your body. So this is going to be the palm of your hand. Comparatively, your fingers are only going to be a little bit shorter usually than your palm. But look at your hand and measure. Just see, are your fingers as wide as your palm is or as tall as your palm is? Everyone's proportions are different, depends on what you do daily, if you like stretch or anything like that. So I'm gonna go that the top of my fingers is about here. If I compare this to this, it's just a little bit shorter, which is perfect. And that's gonna represent the tallest finger even. Now when I do my fingers, they have to connect into my palms. So here, and then my pinky side, which is over on the other edge. Your pinky, notice how much shorter it is than your other fingers. I like to just pre-indicate that. So you kind of have a glove. And your thumb acts very independently. So for your thumb, if you hold your hand, kind of relax, just shake your hand out until it relaxes. See how your thumb sits, see how high it goes. Mine hits about here in comparison to the rest of my fingers. There's like a slight bend. Unlike the rest of your fingers, your thumb only has two parts. Then it connects to the rest of my hand about here. So there should be a point where you see this harsh angle come inwards. If that's difficult for you to place how far to make your thumb, start at the bottom of your hand instead. So start here, go look at the angle that your thumb is at, and then you can place your thumb afterwards. And that ensures that you don't space it too far away. After you have this, I like to add in your wrist. So I'll quickly just add that little cylinder so that it looks like it's attached to the rest of my body. I like to start with the thumb since it's different than the other fingers that we already learned how to do. So your thumb has this point over here where it suddenly connects to your palm. It's a different shape. If you open your fingers or open your fist, you'll see that your thumb acts very independently. And to get that independence, there's kind of this big area if you squish right under your thumb where you feel the like muscle right there. And so I'm going to indicate that with like an oval or almost like a teardrop shape. If you think of like a baseball mitt, the thumb is also very independent. And instead of splitting your thumb into 3 parts, you'll just have from here to the tip of it split in about half. And your thumb is like a finger sideways. So at a sideways angle, you're going to see it face more like this. So you have this almost like D shape for a fingertip. And depending on how your finger rests, mine curves, but some of them will have more of this angle instead. And your thumb attaches with just like skin. There's not really muscle in between your thumb and the rest of your palm. It's just like a kind of thin piece of skin that will fold. So the closer it is, the more folds you'll kind of see in there. The farther it is, the more of a stretch you'll see. So at a relaxed hand, you'll see some of the folds right there. Because your thumb is not fully facing you, you'll see a little bit of the nail come in from right behind it. See some folds for that knuckle, a little bit of fold for the actual inside palm part. And then we're going to attach this into our wrist. So that is the thumb. And now we have the actual fingers, which we already practiced doing. You want to start by looking at your fingers and seeing how much space is in between them. Unless you're trying really hard, you're not really going to have your fingers all pressed together very nicely. That will make a much shorter, kind of closed in rectangle for your palm. When your hand is relaxed, it'll open up like this. If you stretch your hand really wide, then your fingers will spread out way more. Right now, at a neutral kind of open palm, you're going to see your fingers are spread out. So one finger here, one here, one here, and then your pinky. Just make sure that your pinky is attached to the rest of your palm. Your pointer finger is also attached to the other side. So one of the mistakes I see with hands is I'll have these 4 fingers and then extra space on the sides, which looks very strange. So you want to make sure that the outer fingers, the pointer and the pinky, get attached to the actual palm. Now you can break these down into the 3 different sections. Notice the difference in height. The middle finger is going to be the tallest, and depending on your personal hand, see which between the ring finger and the pointer finger is taller. They might be even, one might be taller than the other. So I'm going to just round out all of those and then divide them into my 3 different cylinders. Notice that all the different digits are also separated. They also have the same kind of curvature as the top, and the pinky way down lower. I'm going to add in my little lines to help separate them. And then in between your fingers, you might see some space. So make sure to indicate that amount of space and connect all of your different cylinders to each other. And we're just sketching this out, so we're not really going to shade this. After you have your fingers kind of planned out and separated, we're going to add the details in the hand. So you should see a line underneath the pinky. Everyone has kind of a different set of lines. That's why they palm read. They look at these lines. So you're going to get those in. You don't have to do every single line. You definitely don't want to do them like too dark, but just add a few little details lightly. At the bottom of your palm, you're going to add this kind of curvy W, very, very wide, just to separate your palm and like all the kind of muscles and fat that sits in there. And I like to add these 2 kind of lines for the veins that are showing that connect into your arm. Then smooth some things out, not perfectly. Again, we don't want anything to be straight lines, but we want to separate our palm and get the kind of like bumps that occur before your wrist. And that is how you do the front of your hand. So please label that front. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the back of the hand. So in order to do this, we're going to use the same proportions just like last time. In purple, you're going to see me drawing for anyone who's left-handed, but the proportions are basically the same. So you want to start with the palm, making sure that it's not quite a square, but it's a little bit longer than it is wide. Same thing, your fingers are going to be slightly shorter. I like to indicate the first three all attached, and then the pinky kind of on its own coming out of the palm. And then we want to check on how high up our thumb goes, about here, and then attach that inwards. Same as before, I like to add my wrist in there. So we already have our basic proportions for our hands. Same thing, if you relax your hand, you should see your thumb isn't too far away. We can divide it a little bit differently this time. So over here we have these parts that attach into our wrist. And then at about this point to here, we want to divide that in half and get the bend of that before it attaches into the rest of our palm from the back of our hand now. Your thumb is going to look a lot lower down on this side because the actual skin that attaches it is on the palm. So this is going to look slightly lower than it did on the other side, even though it's in the same place. It's just that there's a line here to kind of separate it. And if you open your finger, you'll see that kind of attachment is coming from the other side. Your thumb is facing you about 3/4 of the way, so you're still not going to see a full nail right in the center like this, but you're going to see it off to the side, so you'll see about 3/4 of your nail. And you'll see that bend just one area for the thumb. And I'm going to add some folds right there. So here you'll see the palm coming in and then some folds underneath that thumb. And I can start to erase some of my guidelines to make this look more natural. Next, we're going to deal with the fingers. So same thing, you want to indicate where your 3 fingers are. We don't want to press them too close together, but leave them some room. So there's going to be some space in between your fingers a lot of the time, unless you're working really hard to press them in together. You still get to separate them into those 3 different parts. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and they follow this arch. And this time when your fingers separate, if you open and close your hands, you'll see a little bit of like webbing in between. So imagine I have 2 fingers like this. The farther apart they get, the more of that webbing you're going to see, similar to when you move your thumb away. There's just a more subtle version of it between your fingers that you only see through the back. And that's because there's just skin here that's wrapping around. There's more in the front. So you'll see that kind of webbed structure in between your fingers this time. Try to make sure that your first 3 fingers are roughly the same in width. They get a little bit skinnier as they go outwards, and we don't want them all to be the same height. So double check that they're all different heights, or at least the middle finger is the tallest one, and that your pinky is maybe like 3/4 or 4/5 as big. Right now this looks like the front of the hand again. At least the thumbnail helps me remember this is the back of my hand. So I'm going to add those nails to help me differentiate that this is the back of my hand. And again, the knuckles are very different this time. So you're going to see a lot of detail at the bottom ones, going up and curving down. A lot less detail for the ones that are more towards the fingertips. And that's pretty good. The part right here, the back of your hand, looks very blank right now. So what you actually want to do is look at the knuckles that are connecting your fingers to the rest of your hands and notice that they're kind of diamond shaped. So your knuckles, and pardon the backwards writing, are going to be diamond shaped. So you'll see these kind of loose diamonds underneath there. And if you just stretch those out, again, very lightly, that creates a more believable hand. They all kind of meet going towards your wrist. So that little detail in there is going to add a lot more realism to the back of your hand. And one more thing is right here, the ulna has on the pinky side a little notch that you want to add as well, just a little bump on the pinky side before you add it to your wrist. And I'll do some very loose shading to add a little bit more dimension, especially in the nails. And that is how you do the back of your hand. So your assignment is to pose your hand in some other way now and practice it on your own. Just a sketch, no shading necessary. Thank you.